The session, the three papers of the session dealt with three very different things. Each of them focused on specific groups of losers from trade or trade policy, going kind of backwards from the last to the first, because I want to say more about the first. The last paper was about illegal trade in opium, and the speaker was from Afghanistan. A terribly important issue, not, I think, primarily an issue of, although it is certainly trade, it's not something that the WTO is going to be able to deal with, and it's not typical of most of the problems with trade. The second paper dealt with anti-dumping policies and the disadvantages those impose on small and medium-sized enterprises. I'm not a fan of anti-dumping policies. I have never thought about the effects on SMEs. I see their point, I think, but I'm not sure that's by any means the biggest problem with trade or trade policy. The first paper dealt with the thing that I think many countries, including the United States, has been struggling with, and that's the number of people who feel that they have been dislocated, lost their jobs specifically, because of international trade. And the even larger number of people who, although they haven't lost their jobs, they know people who have, they fear that they might have that happen to them, and it has caused a pretty substantial part of the public in America, I think also in Europe, I don't know so much about Asia, to turn against the trading system and be unhappy with it. And of course it lay behind things like the Brexit vote and Donald Trump's election, because he was opposed to international trade. The insight that was provided by that paper was one I had not thought of, and I think is valuable. The idea that what needs to be done is to get companies that are perhaps even themselves gaining from globalization to go out of their way to train and hire the workers who are dislocated in other parts of the economy in order to help with that transition. And I like that because although our government in the US has a small policy for trying to help such people, it doesn't work very well at all. The Europeans have, I think, a better system, but I gather it doesn't work very well either. So this idea of getting the private sector involved in going out of its way to train, retrain if necessary, even help with relocation, and then employing these people, seems like a very good idea. I don't know if it can be implemented. I don't think it's something that the World Trade Organization would play much of a role in, except perhaps, I mentioned to the speaker, I feared a little bit that if governments are too active in helping or encouraging companies to do this, they might be accused of subsidizing the workers, and other countries might complain about that in the WTO. So we need to have some opening for that kind of thing to be done. Now, whether that's the only or the best way to bring the stakeholders around, it's certainly not the only. I've heard in the last couple of days others arguing for much more conversation, much more people who think they understand trade and its benefits, speaking to the public, speaking to groups in schools or in clubs or whatever, to try to, we would say, educate them. They would think maybe that's an elitist perspective, but as a professor of international trade, that's what I do, is I teach my students the benefits of trade. The trouble is the students that take my courses, they usually take my courses because they already believe in the benefits of trade. What we need is to be telling all of this to a broader audience, and not just to talk about the benefits of trade, but to address the costs of trade, to acknowledge for those stakeholders who feel they are getting hurt, that they are in fact getting hurt, and telling them what can be done about it.